talk name is AI and Hierarchy of Human Needs. To be of true value to humans, the areas to which AI is applied should correspond in priority, in type, and in degree of focus to the human hierarchy of needs. In this talk, Nathalie will provide an overview of the AI landscape as it currently maps to the human needs. She'll walk us through how the present degree of focus and the percentage of solutions in AI compare to the priority and size of common human needs. She'll then share perspectives on what is working well and not in the current state, and what we should stop, start, and continue. Nathalie Crosbie drives strategy, delivery, business development, and customer success for the enterprise-wide AI technology team at Bank of Montreal. She's also an advisor coach for startups and individuals, including entrepreneurs and founders with Ryerson University Social Ventures Zone, Incubator. Nathalie has 15 years of experience in tech, providing strategy, product, user experience, and people leadership to create award-winning experiences. She has served as a consultant to AI startup in fintech, legal tech, and held leadership role focused on user experience design, product, and people for well-known Canadian companies like Shopify and Rogers. Nathalie is also a passionate advocate for inclusivity in tech. So let's hear what she has to tell us.
Thanks, Dragos. Wow, standing there while your bio's read out is a lot like sitting there while people sing happy birthday to you. It's just this really long, kind of flattering, sort of uncomfortable process. So. Also, I forgot how much I'd given him in advance. I think I could probably skip to slide 10 at this point, so we'll zip through some of them. Okay, so like many of us, there's some global issues that I'm thinking about quite a bit these days, and there's some things that are really on my mind. So climate is one of them, preventing illness, injury, staying healthy, the safety and well-being of our children, and of ourselves and the world. And I got to thinking, when I spoke to Dragos about speaking here, and got a bit of a sense of what this event is like, and he really stressed that he likes to have people come and talk who are passionate about something, and that it doesn't necessarily need to map with expertise. I am working in the field of AI. I'm not working in the field of specifically focusing on AI to solve global problems, but I'm really interested in that, and I'm really passionate about it. And I really like forcing mechanisms as well. So I'll often set myself a deadline as a way of making myself do something. So I also tend to use opportunities for thought leadership as a chance to learn myself about a topic and make myself kind of have to know more about it. So in deciding what to speak about, this is what I chose. So I'm not an expert. I've learned a lot in putting this together. There's probably going to be some things in there that you know more about than I do, and I look forward to you coming up to me after the talk and telling me what I got wrong and what I don't know. So, all right. So, my opinion is that to be of true value to humans, the areas in which AI are applied should correspond in size and in criticality to the biggest human need areas and biggest human problems. It was my sense going into this that that might not be the case. If that isn't the case, then what can we do about it? And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but Dragos has saved me the time, so I'll just skip past all that. I guess the things to call out is beyond what I've done from a work perspective in the areas that I'm doing. I'm also a mom. I'm also someone that, like many of you, cares about the world and is a bit worried about what we're seeing and kind of feels a little bit, I don't know about you guys, but a little bit at a loss sometimes for what to do about it. We hear these scary things and it can feel like we're just one person, and what do we do about that? Or we'd love to spend more time on that, but we have to make a living. And so those are things that I share and that I've been thinking about. So my purpose and goal for this talk, I always like to think this is my UX background coming in, but I like to think of, by the end of this, what do I hope that I've accomplished? What do I hope that you walk away with? And so there's three things. One is I hope that you walk away knowing what I've learned from doing this. Number 2, I hope that it sparks some new thoughts for you. Maybe it gives you one new thing to think about. And third, because some of these topics are a bit scary and worrisome, I like to end with a feeling of that we can take some action. And I know that this audience is a mix of people who are specialists in AI, probably people who are interested, and people who are in the field but not necessarily technical. So I've tried to make end with some actions that we can take regardless of where we fall in there. And so those are the 3 things. Some tangible steps is the third. So what I'll cover is I couldn't look at the whole problem globally, so I decided to pick something to use as a sample to decide whether or not the proportion of focus of AI is in proportion to the top issues. So I'll show you that sample, and I'll talk about the number of AI solutions that seem to be focused on what I consider the big issues compared to what I've researched are the big issues. And then I'm going to share a perspective on some of what's being done, some of what I found is being done, and then also some of the things we can do. So a couple of frameworks that I'm going to reference during this talk. Some you may already be familiar with. So one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For those who aren't familiar with it, although I imagine many are, it's a motivational theory in psychology that comprises, in this case, 5 tiers. It evolved and there were some other tiers, but I just kept it simple at 5 for now. 5-tier model of human needs, often depicted in hierarchical levels like this as a pyramid. And part of that theory was that people weren't worried about filling their needs at the top end until the bottom ones were filled, and some of that's been debated. I'm less concerned about that. Why I found this model interesting is I just like the really succinct way of thinking about our needs as humans and sort of some of the ways that we generally prioritize that. So I'll just describe those a little bit. So from the bottom, one moment. Okay, so from the bottom we've got physiological needs. I'm going to name a few things that are beyond what you see there. Air, food, water, shelter, warmth, sleep fall into that level. Second, security needs, safety, shelter, law, order, employment, health, stability. Social needs, belongingness, love, affection, intimacy, family, friends, relationships. Esteem needs cover self-esteem, self-confidence, achievement, recognition, status, respect. And self-actualizing needs, so realizing our full potential, self-fulfillment, pursuing talents, personal growth, peak experiences. And then I'm also going to refer to some of the top global issues. I've picked a sample of the top ones here. There's several more, but the ones that I picked are sort of the really, really critical ones. So we've got poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. And malnutrition includes both not having enough to eat, but also obesity. Second is global health issues overall. Third is specifically global child health and education. Fourth, gender equality. Fifth, global climate and environment issues. And sixth, conflict in the world. So I'm going to name a few statistics there just to give that context. So for number 1, this is the number 1 health risk globally. Just a statistic there, 11% of people globally are malnourished and 40% are overweight. That's in the adult population. In terms of global health issues, there has been quite a focus put on preventing communicable diseases. So now there's a little bit of a shift more towards focusing on non-communicable diseases, so cancer, diabetes, and so on, as well as preventing road injuries. So especially in developing countries, as well as here, there can be, that can be a big cause of harm to humans. Third, global child health and primary education. So one statistic there that struck me as 1 in 4 children under 5 are actually at an inadequate height for their age due to nutrition. And gender equity. Women and girls are half the population and therefore half of the potential for human potential. And so equality is a fundamental right, and it's essential for peaceful societies and for us to realize our full potential. Fifth, global environmental issues. So we're all familiar with that, I think, at this point, but there's habitat and biodiversity loss, forest conservation, water scarcity, pollution. All of these things are combining to be threatening in terms of weather, in terms of food scarcity. And sixth, conflict. The 2020 Global Humanitarian Report said that in 2020, 1 out of 45 people on Earth will need help and protection across more than 50 countries, which is the highest figure in decades. So in deciding how to look at this, I decided to use something that I've seen and some of you might have seen before, which is this top 100 AI startups. They've come up with this list. It's CB Insights. Come up with this list for the last few years annually. It's an interesting list. I actually think it's really fun. It's exciting. It's always nice to see what the startups are doing. I'm going to use this just as something to reference, to kind of as a bit of an experiment to see how that top 100 and the focus that it has, the sectors that it's focusing on and the problems it's solving compare to the global issues that we're seeing. It's an imperfect approach, but it's just to give us something to work with. So for those who don't know about the 100 list, the 100 startups list is pulled from a pool of 3,000 companies based on several factors, including things like patent activity, investor profiles, news and sentiment analysis, and various other things. And they're categorized by their main focus areas. It's a little bit hard to see here, but you can go look at it online and you'll see it. One of the, so CB Insights, in addition to that, that visual that you saw, there's a lot of supporting visuals. And this one was interesting to me, which is the 100 most well-funded of those startups, or the top 10, sorry. And what was interesting to me about that, and again, imperfect, but I kind of was experimenting a little, is I took those 10, and here you can see they published the 10 and then the sectors. And I went through and I looked at them and what they were focusing on and the AI technology that they were using and the problems they were solving. And then I did a very subjective color coding. Basically, the way that I approached it was I thought, if I look at it through the lens of the top issues, the top problems to solve for humans, how much are they doing that? And so red was, I didn't really see a relationship. Yellow, mostly it meant I could see how it could be used very much in support of solving some of the problems, or depending how it was applied, very much in a way that maybe even worked against some of the needs. And this is not a criticism of these startups. They're doing amazing work. They've gotten really great accolades for their success, but I'm just using it as a framework for talking about it. So I'll give you an example. So for example, SenseTime AI Technologies, one of the things that they do, if you're not familiar with them, is face, image, object, text recognition, medical image and video analysis, remote sensing, and autonomous driving systems. So AI-powered image recognition can do great good, for example, in healthcare for diagnosis and medical treatment. So in that case, if we map it to the hierarchy of needs, it's actually addressing one of the very fundamental and most important needs. But in the same way, it can also actually detract from that and be a threat to some of those needs. For example, there's significant concerns about this technology in general, not specifically the startup, but there are significant concerns about facial recognition technology being used for racial profiling or to track the actions of particular racial minority groups. So this possibility takes away. So not only is it not meeting a need, but then that would actually cause us to worry or feel threatened or scared. So it kind of works against a need. So in thinking about this, I came across, for those who are familiar with 80,000 hours, I'll go into them a little bit more later, but it's an organization that aims to solve the most pressing skill bottlenecks in the world's for the world's most pressing problems. And the way that it talked about this sort of dichotomy that I was describing is it says new transformative technologies may promise a radically better future, but also pose catastrophic risks. Mitigating these risks while increasing the chance that these technologies allow future generations to flourish may be the crucial challenge of this century. So as I reviewed the list of the top 10 most funded startups for 2019, I was struck by what was represented there. So where transformative technologies like image recognition produced by companies like the top funded SenseTime have both this promise and this risk, and that there was a possibility for many, if not most of the products of the top 10 to be similar. So here I just kind of brought it against the hierarchy of needs, and there was some places where I could see that it actually mapped, and other places where it didn't necessarily, and then many places where I couldn't really tell what the impact would be. And then this is all of them. This is all of them categorized. So I looked at the focus areas and I totaled them. So I thought, okay, how many are doing cybersecurity? How many are data management? And I put them in decreasing order. And what was interesting to me was that a lot of the ones that most clearly aligned, there was actually, you can see there's number ones there. There was actually fewer of those. And then the ones that were higher up were a little bit less clearly identified. Again, not a super scientific approach. If I dove super deep on all of them, I might change some of those colors. But overall, just looking at it really quickly, that kind of struck me. And then I took the same model and I looked at our top 6 issues. And there's a lot more of those really basic needs that are at stake with those top 6 issues. And really, we're not really as worried about the things up there, right, that AI can do for us when we've got so many of the issues down here. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about some of what's being done in the world around these problems, the application of AI for them. And I'm going to start with a quote from Elizabeth Mason, who's the founding director of the Stanford Poverty and Technology Lab, which is an incubator for technology-based solutions to address poverty. And she says that technology in general puts us in a better position to solve issues we've never been able to solve. AI is one such technology solution, and I'm now going to share a few of the ways that it's been solved. It's been applied to solve some of those big human needs. So before I do that, I'm just going to share this with you. Some of you may be familiar with this already. It's another framework. So in 2015, the world embarked on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that was adopted by all UN member states. And this is a list of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are a key part of that. The list is described as providing a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, and an urgent call to action by all countries developed and developing in a global partnership. And another thing that they cover is big data for those. So they go on to speak about the important role that data plays. So like in business, data is the lifeblood of decision making and the raw material for accountability. Similar techniques as what's being used in business could be adopted to gain real-time insights into people's well-being and to target aid and intervention to vulnerable groups. So new sources of data, such as satellite data, new technologies, and new analytical approaches, if applied responsibly, can enable a more agile, efficient, and evidence-based decision-making and better measure progress on those SDGs in a way that's both inclusive and fair. Obviously, there's a lot that has to be done to ensure that fairness, and we could have a whole separate conversation around making sure there's no biased data and we approach data properly, but assuming that that's done well, it can be a really, I keep forgetting that's there. Big help. So they've mapped the opportunities to leverage data and technology to those 17. So here's an overview. Again, you can see all of this on the UN website as well. But they've taken each of those 17 and they've started to think a little bit about some of the ways that we can use technology. In some cases, just technology. In other cases, data and AI to solve some of those problems. So I'm going to go through the 6 big issues, and I'm going to talk to you now about some of what's being done for each of those. So first I'm going to talk a little bit, so the first one you'll remember was poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. And I'll cover a little bit as a foundation many of the causes of poverty, hunger, and malnutrition so that you can have a bit of context for the solutions that are being put into place. So lack of being able to find those in need due to difficulty of gathering this kind of data in developing countries in particular makes it hard to address poverty. Lack of affordable local food, low education and skill levels, natural disasters, epidemics, and displacements due to conflict and natural disasters. And so some of the ways AI can or is already being used to help address these issues. One is harnessing AI's data mining ability to pinpoint regions most in need. So for example, you can see this is actually a satellite image pinpointing very active communities, so they can do sort of a reverse review of that data to identify communities that are not as economically active. There's more information on this site if you want to read more about it. But here are some examples. Leveraging satellite imagery to identify areas with visible global economic activity or not, and monitor economic well-being to evaluate the effectiveness of anti-poverty programs. So as they put measures into place, can we see in the imagery any kind of change? Analyzing spending patterns on mobile phone services as proxy indicators for income levels, integrating AI into research designed to improve architecture, investing in agriculture is up to 4 times more effective in reducing poverty than investing in other economic factors. So that makes agricultural development a powerful poverty reduction tool. There's one approach there called FarmView, which is a project that combines AI with robotics to improve the agricultural yield of certain staple crops. So that's one approach to trying to address hunger. And they also use AI to track all the vast amount of data around plant growth and all those minute details about genetics and environment that affect plant characteristics and yield. So that's one of the ways that it's being used. It's also used as a tool for increasing access to information and boosting education and literacy for members of low-income communities, because that's also access to information, a big differentiator with poverty. And another example is crowdsourcing and otherwise tracking food prices listed online to help monitor food security in real time. Moving on to the second one, which is global health issues. I'll give you a few examples there as well. So some of the ways that AI can be applied in the area of global health. Some of you may recognize this visual. This is from MIT, which did a deep learning-based AI prediction model that anticipates the development of breast cancer up to 5 years early, which is just still mind-blowing to me. That's so incredible. Also using AI to map the movement of mobile phone users to help predict the spread of infectious diseases. I find when I read that one, it kind of both makes me excited and a little bit creeped out, because I think the tracking of, of people can be problematic as well, but it's nice to see the side that it can have that's positive. Having AI sensors connected to water pumps to track the access to clean water. And then there was a couple from AI machine learning specialist Siobhan Zelis. Some of you may know her. She shares a few on her website as well. So companies that are with the Creative Destruction Lab, Machine Intelligence Accelerator, are working on problems like earlier disease detection and injury prevention. And she also highlights 2 companies who are both actually being well funded, which is great to see. and are focusing on top issues as well. So two to highlight there are ECHO, which raised $20 million for AI heart disease monitoring, and KI, I don't know if I'm pronouncing these right, raised $8 million to treat chronic pain with AI-guided exercises. Third one, child health and primary education. The statistics you're seeing here are the predictions for the kind of issues that we're going to be faced with by 2030 if we don't accelerate the way that we address the issues of child health and primary education. So some of the ways that AI is being used, just a couple examples. AI for child health and education. AI can mine citizen reporting data to reveal patterns and reasons for student dropout rates. And it can help ensure child physical and psychological well-being. So for example, one startup called Thorn is a startup that creates algorithm techniques to protect children from online exploitation, which I think is just such a great cause. Next, AI need for gender equality. So here are a couple of examples of how AI is or can be applied there. It can be used for the analysis of financial transactions to reveal spending patterns and different impacts of economic shocks on men and women. So there's a contrast there that we can do. And speech-to-text analytics on local radio content or other content that can reveal discrimination, concerns, and support policy responses. That one will come up as an example later on as well. Next, fifth, AI for global environmental issues. This is one of the things that we're talking about the most. It's also one of the ones where there's a lot of really interesting things that AI is being applied to. So AI for ocean and forest preservation and city community sustainability. So for example, using satellite data and maritime vessel tracking data in near real time can detect illegal, unregulated, or unreported fishing activities. So Google, for example, is partnering with some nonprofits on the Global Fishing Watch. It can also be used to track encroachments on public land or spaces such as parks, and combine satellite images with crowdsourced witness accounts and open data to track deforestation and illegal logging. And an example of that is Orbital Insight and Global Forest Watch. AI can also be used for affordable clean energy, so we're using smart metering to decrease the flow of electricity, gas, or water to reduce waste and ensure adequate supplies at peak periods. AI is also being used for responsible consumption and production. So for example, identifying and analyzing online search and e-commerce patterns can determine the rate of transition to energy efficient products. And social media monitoring can support disaster management with real-time information about victim location, effect, and length, including things like forest fires. And I've got a picture here of an AI drone to help fight, for example, the ocean plastic problem. So those are just a few of those examples. And for our last one, AI for conflict and peace. So sentiment analysis of social media can reveal public opinion on effective governance, public service delivery, and human rights. AI for discrimination, the example that I gave before about the radio, so monitoring the speech-to-text analytics for local radio content can also be applied here. So to reveal discrimination concerns and support policy response. And overall, in various ways, it can also be used to support connectivity between humans. So now, having covered some of the ways that I've found that AI is being applied to solve some of those big problems, I went looking for some things that just you and I can do. What I wanted to do was find ways we can both learn and also do things in small ways. If, like me, you work somewhere in AI that's more of a profit generating type of AI context, you'll probably want to be able to find a way to feel like you're doing some of these things in a way that you can actually manage time-wise. And if, like me, you're not an engineer, but you're still in the space, or you're not in the space, ways that you can still contribute even without being an engineer. And so here's a few ideas that I came across. this first one is a past one, but I thought it was kind of cool, and why I brought it up is I just thought it's something that can maybe help us be motivated to go look for other similar things. So what this was, a new shape, was an open call in 2016-2017 to find new models for global cooperation capable of handling global catastrophic risks. It actually received almost 3,000 entries from 122 countries, with contributions ranging from academic institutions, think tanks, researchers in business, all the way to university students and non-governmental organizations. So pretty much anybody could submit, which I think is great. And there was 3 proposals put forward. They weren't all AI related, but one of the 3 was. And one of the 3 that won was the AI supported global governance through bottom-up deliberations. So AI was selected as one of the ones for this. So the action there is just go looking for more of those and submit ideas. Contributing to projects is another thing that we can do. Mila has a visualizing climate change. So Mila, 2 things stood out to me. One was that they actually are always recruiting for people to work in machine learning and AI. And since they have a visualizing climate change project, they're actually hiring people specifically to do that. But even if you are not someone who's a postdoc who qualifies for that role, another thing that I thought was interesting is that anyone can contribute images of flooded houses and streets to train the AI model. So anybody, even if you just have one, you can mail it to them, and you're doing your part to contribute images that they'll then use to train the model to help produce these kind of visualizations that help people understand a little bit more the impact of not doing something about climate. There's another place where you can get involved in projects, which is the AI repository. So they talk about having AI-related projects, research initiatives, think tanks, and organizations that can accelerate the progress towards those 17 SDGs that we looked at earlier. It's open to all, and they invite anyone working in the field of AI to contribute to a project, and they ask that you map your project to those one of those 17 goals. And then if it's approved, anybody can then go in and go to their website and look for, you can actually click on any of the goals that resonate for you, and then you can get a list of all of the projects that are working on specifically solving that problem. Another one that I came across was climate change AI, and here's just a few of the things that you can find there. So you can read some of their papers, you can learn, you can go to some of their events, you can attend a workshop or submit a workshop. And the other thing that I wanted to cover was, who are some employers who are specifically focusing on this. And so I pulled out, these are some of the bigger names that specifically have a focus on, or an arm focusing on solving some of the big problems. So Microsoft, most recently, with their AI for Good, IBM, Mila, Google. And so this also shows a trend of big employers really realizing the importance of doing this and being accountable. And then I wanted to go through the 80,000 hours that I mentioned earlier. So this is another employment opportunity. They are hiring themselves, but they also facilitate finding roles and careers in this field. So the way that they describe themselves is, you have 80,000 hours in your career. How can you best use them to help solve the world's most pressing problems? They provide free advice and support to help you have a greater impact with your career, and it includes a job board to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And one thing that's really interesting about them is that they actually have really scientific ways of evaluating problems, and they don't just say go work on these top problems. They look also at what are the biggest problems that the fewest people are working on, so that we can encourage more people to work on those. And then they also measure, based on various calculations, the impact that can be made by adding more people to those problems. So it's really interesting. And they have a list of recommended employers who are applying AI for good. You can also go to OpenAI, and if you have technical ability, create your own apps and products to do good with AI. And you can learn and collaborate. There's an AI for Good Summit. So this is happening in Europe, I think, this year. And so that's another way that you can connect with people who care about this and find partners and collaborators. And I'll end with a couple of quotes. So we're in a time of huge hope and huge risk. As a society, we make choices in what we invest in. So what choices are we going to make? Hopefully choices leading to this. The coming era of artificial intelligence will not be the era of war, but the era of deep compassion, nonviolence, and love. Thank you.
We have time for 2 questions. So,
are you choosing or am I choosing?
You are choosing.
I'm choosing.
Can you choose
okay.
some ladies?
I saw this hand over here.
Nope, you already asked.
Oh, okay.
Some ladies' questions, please. I saw some. You have to raise the hand higher.
Hi. First of all, thanks so much for your wonderful presentation and tying back a very geeky subject to human issues. So since your focus has been on helping people and society, one of the concerns that a lot of people have, especially people who work in manufacturing or blue collar, is basically as a result of advancing AI and machine learning and robotics, they might lose their jobs.
Yeah.
So a lot of us here have the opportunity to advance our education and learning, and I myself am working on cloud computing, so maybe the danger for us, the risk for us is much less, versus those people that they don't have that opportunity and they're still working, I don't know, manual jobs and jobs that they can be easily replaced.
Yeah.
So what's your solution, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one that I've heard posed at various AI events. I don't have all the answers for that, so what I'll do is I'll actually give some answers I've heard other smart people who do talks on this subject talk about. I think how much displacement there will be compared to how much other options are being generated is TBD, and probably also not going to totally replace, but I know that there are new jobs created, and not just the PhD level jobs, because I know that can often be an argument, right? It's like, oh great, there's more jobs being created, but this person's just doing admin, and then you're asking for a PhD in machine learning. That's obviously not translatable. But I have heard, and I can look up some resources, but I've heard things like, for now anyway, people who can drive cars around to take images that feed the AI imagery, is jobs that are being created that weren't there before. So there are still some entry, more foundational jobs, or I don't know what word to use for it, but jobs that don't require you to have a really high level of education. But I also think, and even pre-AI, right, I think there's just always advancements, and I think it's our responsibility to always be trying to stay relevant in our work. I mean, AI is one of the big things everybody's talking about, but I think we have to try to do that throughout our careers, regardless of what period of time it is, to be sort of self-caring and responsible for ourselves. And I also know that there are a lot of programs. I was at the World Education, I can't remember what the I can't remember what it was, but anyways, a Future of Work talk where they were talking a lot about that, and especially in the context of people arriving in the country who have the extra challenge of being new immigrants, having to find work, and also facing this future of work situation. I don't have all the answers for it. I don't know if anybody else here has a really good suggestion, but I'm still learning about that myself.
Okay, so Nathalie will still be around for other questions. So thank you very much for a nice talk.
Thank you.